I used to work the closing shift at a truck stop diner off Route 9 in rural Vermont. If you've never been to that part of the state, I'll print you a picture. Dense tree lines on both sides of the road, a sky so dark on a cloudy night you can't see your hand in front of your face, and stretches of highway where you might drive 20 minutes without passing another car. I was 26 and moved up from Georgia 2 years prior following a breakup that I won't get into. And I'd taken the job because the overnight differential pay was good, and because I've always been a night person. The diner sat at the bottom of a long downgrade, tucked just off the exit ramp. Truckers would stop in during the early hours, sometimes a couple locals who couldn't sleep. It was never busy past midnight, but there was just enough traffic to justify keeping the lights on until 3. By around 2:30, the place felt like the last lit building on Earth. I want to be clear about something before I tell you this. I've worked late nights in food service for most of my adult life. I have a pretty good radar of uncomfortable situations. I'm not someone who spooks easily, and I've never been the type to invent reasons to feel unsafe. What happened to me that night in late October didn't feel like a near miss to me until it was already almost too late to do anything about it. His name, he told me, was Gerald. He came in at 2:17 in the morning on a Thursday. I remember the time exactly because I had just looked at my phone to calculate how much longer until I could start mopping the dining room floor. The bell above the door chimed and I looked up from behind the counter and there he was, standing in the entrance, letting in a long pole of cold air. He was probably in his mid-50s, thin in an angular way, with a kind of careful, deliberate look about him, the kind of man who seemed very aware of how he was being perceived. He had a neat side part, a light jacket, khakis. He looked almost professional, which in my experience means nothing one way or the other, but I noted it. He stood at the entrance for just a second or two longer than most people do before asking to be seated. Most people come in and immediately make eye contact with whoever's working. Gerald looked around the room first. It was just 2 of us in the dining room, a cook named Pete in the back. I seated him at the booth by the window, which he requested specifically after I'd already begun leading him to a booth on the far wall. He said he liked looking out at the road. Fine, normal enough. He ordered decaf and a slice of whatever pie we had left. I told him we had apple and blueberry. He said apple, then asked what my name was. I told him. He repeated it back slowly, like he was trying to remember it. The conversation he tried to start was measured. Too measured for 2 in the morning. He asked about the area, about the road conditions, whether there was much traffic through here on weekdays. I answered the same way I always answer. Brief, friendly, non-committal. The kind of answers that communicate you're doing your job, but you're not inviting an extended conversation. He seemed to understand, or at least accept it, and turned his attention back to the window. I went back behind the counter and started rolling silverware. 15 minutes later, I brought him his check before he asked for it. He looked down at it, then up at me, and smiled. Not an unpleasant smile necessarily, but patient. That's the word I keep coming back to. He looked patient in a way that made the back of my neck prickle, like he was just waiting for something. And the waiting didn't inconvenience him at all. He paid cash, left a 20 on a $7 check, and told me to keep it. He put on his jacket slowly, buttoning it from the bottom up, and then he left. I watched him through the window above the register. He got into a dark blue sedan and parked at the far end of the lot, almost at the tree line. He didn't pull out right away, he just sat there. Pete had come out from the back by this point, and I mentioned it, nodding toward the window. Pete looked out and shrugged and said the guy was probably checking his phone. I said, yeah, probably. The car pulled out 4 minutes later and turned north on Route 9. I clocked out at 3:10 and walked to my car. The parking lot was empty except for my Civic and Pete's truck. The night was cold and still, and my breath came out in short little clouds. I was halfway down Route 9 when my headlights caught it, a shape at the end of the road about 50 yards ahead. I slowed as I approached and made it out. A car pulled off into the gravel shoulder, hazard lights blinking orange, dark blue sedan. I didn't stop. Something in my body made the decision before my brain fully processed what I was seeing. My foot stayed on the gas and I passed at a steady speed, turning my eyes just far enough to see Gerald standing outside the driver's door. He was looking directly at me, not at my car in the way you look at a passing vehicle when you're broken down hoping for help. Directly at me. He raised one hand. I kept driving. I told myself to keep driving and I did. It was maybe 2 minutes later that I noticed the gas gauge. I glanced down almost reflexively, and the needle was sitting just above the quarter tank mark. That stopped me cold, because it shouldn't have been there. I am religious about keeping my tank above half on night shifts. It's one of those rules I set for myself years ago and never break. I'd filled up 2 days prior and hadn't driven enough to account for that kind of drop. I told myself I was misremembering. Then I watched the needle move. Not dramatically, not all at once, but visibly sinking in a way that gas gauges simply don't behave. By the time I'd driven another mile, it was sitting at 1/8 of a tank. My hands tightened on the wheel. I started calculating how far the next gas station, whether I had enough to make it. And while I was still working through the math, the engine coughed once and the car rolled to a quiet, powerless stop. I had just enough momentum to coast off the road into a gravel lot beside a 24-hour laundromat. I could see the lights on inside, which was the only comfort I had. A man was standing out front, leaning against the brick exterior, smoking a cigarette. Middle-aged, heavyset, wearing a flannel jacket. He looked up when my car coasted into a dead roll and immediately seemed to understand something was wrong. He walked over and asked if I was alright. I told him my car had just died and something was wrong, that I thought it might be the gas even though I knew it shouldn't be empty. He asked if he could take a look. I said please. He pulled out his phone for the flashlight and crouched down along the side of the car, then moved toward the rear. He was under there for less than a minute before he stood back up. He looked at me with a careful expression and said there was fuel still wet along the undercarriage. He said the line had a hole in it. Not a crack, not a wear, a hole. He said it looked deliberate. I didn't say anything for a moment. I just stood there in the gravel with the cold coming through my jacket. He asked if I wanted him to stay while I called someone. I said yes. I called the police and then I stood in the parking lot under the laundromat exterior light, staring at the road while we waited. That was when the dark blue sedan came around the bend. It was moving slowly, well under the speed limit, crawling the way a car does when the driver's looking for something specific. Gerald was lit just enough by the laundromat sign for me to make out his face, that side part, that straight posture. He didn't slow further. He didn't turn in. He just stared. His eyes found me across the lot and stayed fixed as his car crept past, his expression flat and unblinking, holding the look for just a second too long before the dark swallowed his taillights around the bend. The police arrived about 8 minutes later. I told them everything. I never heard whether they found him. I called once a few weeks later and they told me the investigation was ongoing. That was the last of it. What kept returning to me is the calculation behind all of it. The 4 minutes he sat in the parking lot before pulling out, the way he'd stage himself up on the road to watch me pass, the puncture designed not to strand me immediately, not in the diner lot where Pete still was, but further down the road, somewhere dark, somewhere quiet. He'd given me just enough gas to get far enough. I quit the next morning and never worked a closing shift again.
Got a real-life scary story? Send it to mjvanimations@gmail.com for a chance to have it featured on the channel.
I used to work the graveyard shift at a gas station, the kind that sits on a main road cutting through a mid-sized town. Busy enough during the day, dead quiet by 1 a.m. The surrounding streets were all residential, the sort of neighborhood where people left porch lights on and parked their cars along the curb. Ordinary. In other words, the kind of place where nothing unusual was supposed to happen. My shifts ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Most nights it was lonely but manageable. A car here, a couple teenagers buying energy drinks there. I had coolers to stock, receipts to tally, and a small mounted TV behind the counter that I kept on low to cut through the quiet. The front of the store was entirely glass, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto the pump islands and the dark highway beyond. I always liked being able to see everything outside clearly. I didn't think about what it meant for anyone outside being able to see me just as clearly. It was a Tuesday in late September when I first saw him. He pulled up to a pump around 1:30 in the morning. Nothing unusual yet. Just a beat-up silver sedan, mid-90s model, with a cracked left taillight. He stepped out and I noticed right away that something was slightly off about him. Nothing in an obvious way. He was an average height, average build, wearing a dark green jacket, but the way he moved was stiff, deliberate, like every motion had been carefully planned before he executed it. He pumped his gas without looking in the station once. Then he walked inside. He grabbed a bottle of water from the cooler and sat it on the counter. I rang it up. $1.12. He put exact change down without a word, and I slid the water across to him. He still hadn't looked at me. Then he did. It was sudden. His head snapped up like something had yanked it. His eyes were pale, not in a striking way, but in a washed-out, colorless way, like something vital had been bleached out of him long ago. He stared at me for a moment, and then without any warning, he picked the water bottle back up and hurled it directly at the glass divider between us. It hit with a sharp crack that made me stumble backward onto the display rack behind me. Bottles and candy bars scattered across the floor. I was so startled I couldn't speak. He leaned forward on the counter with both hands, dropping his voice to something just above a whisper. He said, "You're going to remember my face." Then he pulled back, straightened up slowly, and without another word or glance, walked out of the store. My hands were shaking when I picked up the phone to call the manager. I watched the man on the exterior camera screen as he got into his car. He didn't look at the building. He just sat there for a full 30 seconds, engine running, and then pulled onto the highway and disappeared. My manager told me to document the incident, keep the footage, and call the police if he came back. I said I would. I spent the rest of the next 4 hours sitting on a stool directly behind the counter, watching the parking lot. Then I saw those headlights again. The cracked left taillight glowing in the dark as the silver sedan rolled slowly into the lot. He parked away from the pumps this time. The engine cut off, but didn't get out. Just sat there, completely still, in the dark, for nearly 2 full minutes. I hit the button to lock the front door before he even reached for his handle. He got out and walked directly toward the glass like he already knew exactly where I was standing. He grabbed the door and pulled. It didn't open. He pulled it again, harder. Then he went completely still, and then he pressed his face against the glass. Not casually, the way you might peer inside to see if the store is still open. He pressed his entire face into it, forehead, nose, cheeks, so that his skin flattened and spread against the surface. His colorless eyes were wide open and pointed straight at me. He didn't blink. He didn't shift. He just held himself there, face smeared against the glass, staring. His mouth started moving, even muffled through the door. I could make out what he was saying. "I told you you'd remember my face." Then he started laughing, slow, patient, like a man who had nowhere else in the world he needed to be. I was already on the phone with 911. My voice came out barely above a whisper. I described him, described the car, described what he was doing, all while he stood at the door with his face flattened against it, watching me with those bleached out eyes. When the dispatcher told me units were on the way, the man stepped back from the glass, leaving a long smear of condensation. He looked at his own reflection for a moment, tilted his head slightly, then walked back to his car with the same slow, deliberate pace he always carried. He drove off just before the police arrived. They took my statement, pulled the camera footage, and told me to keep my phone on me. My replacement showed up for the 6 a.m. handoff. I clocked out, said goodnight, and stepped into the cold morning air. The sky was still a dark blue gray, that thin hour just before sunrise where the world feels provisional. The street was empty. I pulled my jacket tight and started the 15-minute walk home through the back residential streets. I heard him before I saw him. No footsteps, something slower, the soft idle of a car engine, barely above silence, rolling along the curb behind me without its headlights on. I turned. The silver sedan. I ran. I didn't think about it. My body just went. I heard the car engine suddenly growl as it accelerated, tires biting asphalt, and then the screech of brakes as it jumped the curb behind me and stopped. A car door opened and slammed hard. Then he was running too. He caught me between 2 parked cars on a dead residential street. He grabbed me by the back of my jacket and swung me sideways into the side of a truck hard enough that the metal boomed and my shoulder went white with pain. Before I could get my footing back, his forearm came across my collarbone and slammed me against it again, pinning me there. His face was inches from mine. Same pale eyes, same flat, patient expression. He said, "I told you you'd remember me." I screamed, as loud as I could, just one raw, sustained sound directed at the houses around us. at any window that might have a light on behind it. His arm pressed harder against my throat, cutting the scream short. I clawed at his jacket. I twisted and got one knee up and drove it hard into his thigh. Not where I was aiming, but it shifted his weight just enough that his grip loosened by a fraction. I shoved it with everything I had. A porch light snapped on, then a second. A front door flew open and a man in his 50s came out onto his steps in a bathrobe shouting, "Hey, what's going on out there?" The man released me completely. I dropped to one knee on the pavement, gasping. By the time the man from the porch reached me, the green jacket was already gone around the corner. Seconds later, I heard the sedan engine tear down a parallel street. The man from the porch helped me inside, gave me water, and called the police. I sat at his kitchen table and shook while I waited. When the officers arrived, I told them everything. Both nights, the water bottle, the face against the glass, the car with no headlights, all of it. They pulled the footage from the gas station. They told me they'd be in touch. 3 weeks later, they called me in and asked me to come in for a lineup. 5 men standing behind a one-way mirror, all roughly matching the description from the cameras. I studied each face for a long time. My heart was hammering. I said I wasn't sure. I said I didn't think it was any of them. To this day, I don't know if that was the truth, or if my mind just refused to put me back in the same room with him, even from behind glass. Even now, even with officers standing right beside me. I never went back to that gas station again. I took a job indoors, daytime hours. But sometimes, when I'm driving at night and I catch a silver sedan parked along the road with its engine off and no one visible inside, I stare at it until I'm past it, watching the rearview mirror until it disappears from sight, just to be sure it isn't him. The guy started showing up every night at exactly 1 a.m. He never bought anything, never spoke, and the worst part, my coworker recognized him immediately. My name's Marcus, and about a year ago, I worked the graveyard shift at a 24-hour Save-Right pharmacy. The job was easy. Most nights were dead. I'd restock the shelves, ring up the occasional customer, and spend the slow hours studying behind the counter. The only other overnight employee was Emma. She had been there longer than me and trained me when I started. Emma was one of those genuinely warm people who remembered customers' names and always tried to make small talk, even at 3 in the morning. Which is why it stood out when I noticed how tense she'd get anytime a tall guy walked into the store. I didn't understand why at first. Then one night, she told me about her ex. His name was David. She didn't go into much detail, just said he'd become controlling. The kind of controlling that doesn't start out obvious, but slowly gets worse. She said she finally left him a few weeks earlier. About 3 weeks after that conversation, I saw him for the first time. Emma was in the back counting inventory, and I was alone at the register when this tall, clean-cut guy walked in. He didn't grab a basket, didn't look at the sale signs, didn't even pretend to shop normally. He just slowly walked the aisles, not browsing, watching. Every time I glanced up, he had the counter in his peripheral vision. After about 25 minutes, I asked him if he needed help finding anything. He just shook his head and walked out. I mentioned it to Emma during break. Her face went pale immediately. "What was he wearing?" she asked. "Black jacket, jeans." She didn't even hesitate. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through old photos, and showed me a picture. Same guy. "That's David," she said quietly. That night, she didn't even take the bus home. She called her roommate to pick her up. I remember watching from the store window while she waited, constantly looking over her shoulder, like she expected him to be standing somewhere in the parking lot. The next night, he came back. This time, he didn't even come inside at first. He just stood outside the automatic doors, staring, not pacing, not on his phone, just watching the store through the glass. I picked up the phone and told Emma I was calling the police. She stopped me. "And then what?" she said. "He's standing on a public sidewalk." She was right. He stayed there for about 45 minutes before finally walking away. After that, it became routine. Every shift, around 1 a.m. Sometimes he'd stand outside. Sometimes he'd come in and walk the aisles. He never spoke, never bought anything, never technically did anything wrong, but he was always there. Emma started making mistakes at work after that, forgetting to restock things, messing up register counts. jumping at small noises. Our manager asked if everything was okay, but she just said she was tired. What else could she say? 2 weeks into this, things escalated. I came back from break one night and saw Emma standing behind the counter staring at her phone, like she'd seen something horrible. She turned the screen toward me. 37 missed calls. No texts, no voicemails, just call after call after call. Like he didn't actually want her to answer. He just wanted her to know he could reach her whenever he wanted. That night, he didn't show up at 1 a.m. At first, it felt like maybe it was finally over, but Emma was more nervous than ever. She kept checking the doors, checking the parking lot, checking her phone. Around 3:30 in the morning, the store got strangely quiet. No customers, no cars outside. Even the usual low hum from the refrigerator sounded louder than normal. Emma kept glancing at the entrance like she felt something coming. At exactly 3:47 a.m., the power went out. The emergency generator kicked in right away, but only the dim backup lights came on. Most of the store dropped into shadow. I grabbed the flashlight from under the counter and went toward the back hallway to check the breaker panel. That's when I heard Emma scream. I ran back to the front. She was frozen behind the counter, pointing toward the pharmacy section. At first I thought it was just shadows moving in the emergency lighting. Then the shadow stepped forward. David was standing behind the pharmacy counter. Inside the employee-only area, the security gate back there was hanging slightly open like it had been forced. "How did you get back there?" I shouted. He didn't answer. He just smiled and started walking toward the gate that led onto the main floor, toward Emma. I moved without thinking and stepped between them. "You need to leave," I said. "I'm calling the cops." He stepped a few feet away from me. "Am I trespassing, Marcus?" he said calmly. Hearing my name made my stomach drop. Then I suddenly remembered the bright plastic name tag on my chest. "I'm a customer," he continued. "The store is open. You broke into an employee area." The gate was open. I got confused in the dark. He tried to step around me. I blocked him again. For just a split second, the calm expression slipped, and I saw something angry underneath. "You're making this difficult," he said quietly. "Good," I told him. "Leave." He stared past me at Emma. "I'll see you later, Em," he said. "We're not done." Then he turned, pushed through the emergency exit, and then the alarm started screaming. By the time the police arrived about 15 minutes later, he was gone. Security footage later showed he'd forced the back service door. Apparently the outside breaker box had always been poorly secured, and he'd shut the power off himself before breaking in. Emma quit the next day. I didn't blame her. Our manager even helped get her a reference somewhere across town. I lasted 2 more days. Then I opened my locker in the break room. Nothing was stolen, but everything inside had been moved, neatly arranged, deliberately. And tucked into my work vest was a folded note. It said, "Thanks for looking out for her. I'll be seeing you around." I checked the security cameras later. They never showed anyone entering the employee hallway that night. I quit that same morning. Emma moved to another city for school. We still text sometimes, but she never mentions David. And I don't ask. The save right still runs 24 hours. New employees, new overnight staff, people who don't know the story. Sometimes I drive past it late at night, and I wonder if he still shows up, still stands outside, still waits. Because the real horror isn't ghosts. It's the person who looks completely normal, who knows exactly how far they can push without breaking the law, who knows where you work, knows your schedule, knows your name, and knows that eventually you'll be alone. I need to tell someone about what happened at my last job, even if it's just putting it out there into the void. It's been 8 months, and I still check my locks 3 times before bed. I got hired as a night manager at a storage facility in October 2022. The pay was slightly above minimum wage, which was just enough to keep me from looking elsewhere. My cousin Derek had worked there for 2 years and put in a good word for me. The job was simple. Sit in the office from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., monitor the security cameras, and make sure nobody broke into the units. Maybe once a week someone would show up to access their stuff, but mostly it was just me, the fluorescent lights, and a thermos of coffee. The facility was massive, over 300 units spread across 5 buildings. The office sat at the front of the property, a small glass-fronted box with a view of the main gate in the first 2 buildings. Behind me was a narrow hallway leading to a bathroom and a storage closet. The walls were thin enough that I could hear the highway traffic a quarter-mile away. Derek trained me for 3 nights, showing me how to use the camera system, how to override the gate if it got stuck, and which units belonged to the problem customers. There was a list taped under the desk. Unit 247, Hoarder, might need a wellness check. Unit 189, behind on payments, do not allow access. Unit 340, if Jerry shows up drunk, call police, don't engage. Most nights you won't see anyone, Derek told me on my last training shift. But when you do, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Lock yourself in the office and call the cops. Don't be a hero. I nodded, thinking he was being dramatic. This was a storage facility in suburban Michigan, not some downtown parking garage. My first solo shift was on Wednesday. The owner was attending some conference in Florida for a week, so it was just me. The evening started normally. I did my rounds with the flashlight at 10:30, checking that all the building doors were secured. The motion sensor lights flickered on as I walked, casting long shadows between the units. Everything was locked up tight. By midnight, I was back in the office working on the inventory spreadsheet the owner wanted updated. That's when I noticed someone on camera 3, the one covering Building C. A man was standing motionless in front of Unit 237, just staring at the rolling door. He'd been there for maybe 10 minutes before I noticed him, perfectly still under the yellow security light. I watched him for a few minutes, waiting for him to move or pull out his keys. He didn't. He just stood there, hands at his sides, facing the unit. I checked the access log. Nobody had entered the gate code since 8 p.m. My stomach tightened, but I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he climbed the fence. Maybe he forgot his code and was calling someone. I zoomed in on the camera, but the angle only showed his back. Average height, dark jacket, jeans, nothing distinctive. I decided to check on him. Technically I should have called the police, but Derek had warned me that they hated false alarms from the facility. The owner had apparently gotten complaints about it before. I grabbed the flashlight and headed across the lot toward Building C. The October air was cold enough to see my breath. My footsteps echoed across the metal buildings. As I rounded the corner, I could see him still standing there, exactly as he had been on the camera. "Excuse me," I called out. "Can I help you with something?" He didn't turn around. "Sir, this is private property. Do you have a unit here?" He turned slowly, and I got my first look at his face. He was maybe 40, with hollow cheeks and dark circles under his eyes, and looked almost bruised. His lips were moving slightly, like he was talking to himself, but no sound was coming out. "Do you need help finding your unit?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "She won't let me in," he said quietly. "Who won't let you in?" "She's in there. She won't let me in." He turned back to face the unit. I glanced at the number, Unit 237. I pulled out my phone and checked the records. It was rented to someone named Diane Morrison, current on payments, no notes about issues. "Sir, I can't let you into someone else's unit. If you have a unit here, I can help you find it, but I need to get in there." His voice was louder now, more insistent. "She has my things. She won't give them back." "I understand, but this is a legal matter. You'll need to work that out with the renter. I can give you the owner's number tomorrow if you want to." "Open it." He still wasn't looking at me. "Open the door." "I can't do that. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the property." That's when he started scratching his arms through his jacket. Long, deliberate movements like he was trying to dig for something out of his skin. The scratching sound made my teeth hurt. "Sir, you need to leave. Now." He turned to face me fully, and the look in his eyes made everything in my body scream at me to run. It wasn't anger exactly. It was emptiness, like looking into a well with no bottom. "I'll come back," he said. "She can't keep me out forever. Then he walked past me, close enough that I could smell him. Cigarettes and something sour, like spoiled milk. He disappeared around Building B, and I heard the chain link fence rattle a moment later. I practically ran back to the office and locked the door. My hands were shaking as I reviewed the camera footage. I watched him climb over the fence at the back of the property at 11:47 p.m. I'd missed it entirely. I called Derek, but it went to voicemail. I left a message trying to sound calmer than I felt. For the next 3 hours, I kept checking the cameras obsessively, watching for any sign of him coming back. Every shadow made my heart race. At 4 a.m., I saw something on camera 3 that made my blood run cold. Unit 237's door was open. Not rolled up, just open about 2 feet. Enough for someone to slip inside. I hadn't heard anything. I'd been watching the cameras, but there it was. A dark gap where there should have been a closed door. I scrubbed through the footage again, going back hour by hour. Nobody approached the unit. One moment it was closed. The next time the camera cycled back to that view, it wasn't. I knew I should call the police. That's what Derek would have told me to do, but a part of me wondered if I'd somehow missed the runner coming by, if this was all a misunderstanding that would make me look incompetent on my first real shift. I grabbed the flashlight and my phone, making sure 911 was ready to dial, and headed back to Building C. The walk felt longer this time. The facility was dead silent except for the hum of the security lights and my footsteps on the concrete. As I approached Unit 237, I could see the gap in the door more clearly. It was dark inside. Hello? My voice sounded small. Someone reported your unit was open. No response. I pulled on the door, rolling it up just enough to shine my flashlight inside. The unit was empty. Completely empty. No boxes, no furniture, nothing. Just bare concrete and metal walls. And on the back wall, written in what looked like black marker, the same sentence repeated over and over in increasingly frantic handwriting. She won't let me in. She won't let me in. She won't let me in. Some of the writing looked faded, like it had been sitting there for months. But some of it looked fresh, the ink still dark and wet looking. A black marker lay on the floor beneath the newest lines, its cap a few feet away. The rental agreement had started 3 weeks ago. According to the records, Diane Morrison had paid for 6 months up front. I quit the next morning when the owner got back. He seemed annoyed but not surprised. Apparently, I was the 4th night manager they had hired that year. Derek told me later that Unit 237 gets rented every few months, always paid in cash, always using different names. The owner barely checked IDs if someone paid in cash up front. Nobody ever puts anything in it. And sometimes, late at night, the door is found open, even though the lock is never broken. I've worked the overnight shift at a highway motel for 3 years. It's not glamorous work. You check people in, you watch the parking lot camera feeds on a little monitor behind the desk. You refill the coffee machine in the lobby at 2 a.m. for the truckers who stop in off the interstate. Most nights nothing happens. That's how I liked it. The motel sits right off exit 14, surrounded by flat farmland on all sides. We get travelers mostly, people passing through on their way somewhere that isn't here, the kind of guests you never see twice. I started noticing this silver sedan about 2 weeks before things went wrong. It would pull into the lot sometime between 10 and 11 p.m. and park in the far corner near the tree line, away from the lights. Just sit there with the engine running. I could see the exhaust curling up in the cold. Then it would leave. No one would get out. No one would come to the desk. The car would idle for 20-30 minutes, then back out slowly and pull out onto the service road. I mentioned it to my manager, Donna. She shrugged and said it was probably kids parking, and that as long as they weren't bothering guests, I shouldn't worry about it. I told her it happened 3 nights in a row. She told me to call the non-emergency line if it happened again. I said okay, and mostly put it off in my mind, the way you do with things that feel slightly wrong but not enough to act on. The 3rd week, a man checked in alone. He was probably mid-50s, heavyset, with a weathered face and very calm eyes. The calm was the part that stuck with me. Most people who come in that late are tired, rushed, frantic from driving. He wasn't any of those things. He sat his credit card down on the counter slowly, like he had all the time in the world. He asked for a first-floor room and I gave him room 107, near the east stairwell exit. He made small talk while I ran the card, asking how long I'd worked here, asking if the motel stayed busy this time of year. I said it slows down in the winter. He nodded like I confirmed something he already knew. Then he said, almost as an aside, "You here by yourself most nights?" I said yes, just on overnights. It's the kind of question you answer on autopilot when you're not paying close enough attention. He thanked me for the card, picked up a single bag, and walked toward the east corridor without looking back. The silver sedan was in the lot that night. I didn't put the two together until later. He checked out the next morning before I ended my shift, quiet as he'd come in. His car was a dark blue pickup that turned west onto the interstate ramp, away from town. I felt relieved, but should have told me something. 2 nights later, I was doing a final walkthrough of the east corridor around 1 a.m. At the far end near the stairwell door, I found a piece of motel notepad paper folded in half on the floor. When I unfolded it, it said, "We know you're here alone." No room number, no name. Just those 6 words in plain block letters, in blue pen. Around 2:30 a.m., I checked the camera feed and the silver sedan was back, parked closer this time, halfway up the lot. Engine running, exhaust rising in the dark. I called the non-emergency line. By the time the officer arrived, the car was gone. He walked the exterior, looked at the note, said it was likely a prank. There just wasn't anything concrete to act on. I understood that. I transferred to the day shift the following week. For a while things felt normal again. The days were bright and busy with ordinary people doing ordinary things. I started to breathe easier. I think that was my mistake. About 6 weeks later after the transfer, I was home on a Tuesday night watching television when something outside caught my eye. A silver sedan was rolling past slowly, not the speed of someone looking for parking, slower than that. It moved to the end of the block and parked 3 houses up, engine idling under the orange glow of a street lamp. Then the lights went off. Then the engine. I live alone in a small rental house on a quiet residential street. No neighbors sharing walls. No one in the unit above to hear anything. I told myself it was a coincidence, sat back down, and turned the television volume up. But the silence of the house felt different after that, heavier. 40 minutes later there was a bang at my front door. Not a knock, a bang that rattled the frame. I crossed the living room and looked through the peephole. A large male figure was standing there on my porch, wearing a dark hoodie, head angled down so his face was completely hidden. He stood very still between knocks, which somehow made it worse. Most people fidget. He didn't. I should have stepped back and called the police right then. Instead, I heard myself say, "Who is it?" He knocked again. I said I wasn't opening the door unless he identified himself. Silence. I don't know why I did what I did next. Something about a person standing silently on the other side of your door makes it feel like you need to resolve it, like the uncertainty itself is the threat. I kept the chain on, opened the door the 2 inches it allowed, and said, "What do you want?" He moved fast. His hand shot through the gap and grabbed the edge of the door and shoved hard. The chain snapped taut and held. He shoved again and I screamed and threw my full weight back against the door. And in that brief second before I slammed it shut, his face swung up toward mine. Those calm eyes, the weathered face. It was him. I got the deadbolt thrown and was already across the room reaching for my phone before I heard myself breathing. My hands were shaking so badly I misdialed twice before I got to 911. I crouched behind the couch and listened to the silence of the house pressing in around me, waiting for another bang that never came. Every creak of the walls, every sound from outside felt enormous in the dark. By the time the dispatcher told me the officers were 2 minutes out, I heard footsteps crossing the porch and descending the front steps. I forced myself to look out the side window. He was moving up the sidewalk at a controlled pace, not running, just walking with that same terrible calm from the motel desk. He reached the silver sedan, got in, and pulled out without turning his headlights on until he reached the end of the block. The police took a report. They took the note I'd kept from the motel. They said they'd look into it. I gave them everything I had, which wasn't much. A partial description, a car color, no plates because I hadn't thought to look. I stayed with my sister for a few weeks. When I came back, I had a second deadbolt installed, a chain on every window, and a porch light that stayed on all night. I keep my blinds closed after dark now and check the streets before I leave every morning. I don't have a tidy ending. No arrest, no explanation. Just a man with calm eyes who knew where I worked, then knew where I lived, and then one day stopped showing up. The last part should feel like relief. Mostly it does. I'm 18 now, but this happened when I was 16, working summers at a mid-sized water park outside of Rochester. I've told maybe 3 people about this. My hands are a little shaky typing this out. It was a Thursday in late July, peak season. The park was packed. The kind of crowd where you're scanning wristbands for 6 hours straight, and every face blurs into the next. I worked the lazy river exit, the unglamorous job of making sure people returned their tubes and didn't slip on the wet concrete, riveting stuff. Around 3 in the afternoon, there was a lull. The clouds had rolled in and people had retreated to the flood pavilion or their cars. I was standing at my post half zoned out when I noticed a woman sitting alone on one of the benches maybe 40 feet away. No swimsuit, no towel. She was wearing jeans and a long-sleeved white shirt, completely dry, just sitting there, watching the empty lazy river current push the rings of water in slow circles. She was probably in her late 30s, plain-looking, brown hair pulled back, nothing immediately alarming, but something about her stillness bothered me in a way I couldn't name. Most people sitting alone at a water park look bored or tired. She didn't look either. She looked like she was waiting for something specific. I went back to checking the last few guests in line. When I looked up again maybe 10 minutes later, she was still there. Same position, and now she was looking at me. Not the water, not her phone. Me. I glanced away and did that thing you do where you convince yourself it's nothing. Coincidence. I scanned her wristband, said enjoy your float, smiled automatically. When I looked back a 3rd time, she was still watching. No expression on her face at all. My coworker Devin came over to cover my 15-minute break around 3:30. I walked to the snack bar, got a water, sat at the table inside the pavilion. I was facing the window that looked out toward the lazy river. From that angle I could still see the bench. She had turned to face the pavilion. I told myself she probably just knew someone who worked there. Maybe she was waiting for a friend. Perfectly reasonable explanations exist for everything if you're motivated enough to find them. When my break ended and I walked back out, she was gone. The bench was empty. I exhaled and felt stupid for letting it get to me. The rest of my shift was uneventful. I clocked out at 6, changed in the locker room, and texted my older sister Maya to let her know I was heading home. I didn't have a car yet, so I took the city bus, a 22-minute ride that dropped me 3 blocks from our house. I was the only person who got on the park stop, found a seat near the middle and put my headbuds in. 2 stops later, someone boarded and sat in the road directly across the aisle from me, the woman in the white shirt. She was still dry, still expressionless. She sat with her hands folded in her lap and was looking straight ahead. Not at me, but every few seconds, I counted, every 6 or 7 seconds, her eyes would slide sideways in my direction and then return forward. My brain did something interesting. It went very quiet and very focused, the way it does when something is genuinely wrong. I pulled out one earbud. I didn't look at her directly. I watched her reflection in the dark window across from me. She got off at my stop. I know how that sounds. I know the rational brain wants to say, well, maybe she just lives near you. And maybe that's true. But she didn't walk anywhere after she got off. I crossed the street at a fast pace, and when I reached the corner, I turned, just glanced back, and she was standing at the bus stop, still on the sidewalk, watching me walk away. The bus had already pulled off. There was nowhere she'd been heading. She'd just ridden to my stop and gotten off. I went home, locked the front door, which I don't usually bother with in the afternoon. My parents were both home, which I was relieved with more than I wanted to admit. I didn't say anything to them. I went upstairs, sat on my bed, and replayed it. By dinner time, I'd almost convinced myself it was a series of coincidences I'd assembled into a pattern because I was bored and looking for something else to be anxious about. After dinner, I went out to the back porch to call my friend Terrell. Our backyard is fenced, but it backs up against a narrow alley that runs between our blocks and the next. While I was on the phone, I happened to look out toward the fence. There's a gap where 2 boards have warped apart over the years, maybe 2 inches wide. And in that gap, visible only because of the angle of the setting sun, was a strip of white fabric. It could have been trash, a plastic bag, anything, but it wasn't moving, and had been there the whole time I was outside. And when I ended the call and took a step forward towards the The strip of white disappeared. Not blown away, not drifting, just gone. Like someone had stepped back quickly. I went inside and didn't go back out. I never saw her again. I don't know who she was or what she wanted, or whether it was as deliberate as it felt. I've never been able to fully settle on an explanation that makes me feel better, which is maybe the part that still bothers me most. Some things don't resolve. They just stop happening, and you're left with the memory of a woman in a white shirt, and a gap in the fence, and that particular kind of quiet that comes over you when your body understands something your mind is still trying to argue with.
I want to preface this by saying what happened to me last spring genuinely changed something in me. There's a version of myself that existed before that night, and there's the version sitting here now. They're not the same person. It started with insomnia, real insomnia, not the kind where you scroll your phone for an extra hour and feel sorry for yourself in the morning. Though if I'm being honest, the phone probably didn't help. I had a bad habit of lying in bed scrolling until my eyes burned, and only when I finally couldn't stand it would I set the phone face down on my nightstand, nudging aside the small picture frame I kept there just to make room. Then I'd stare at the ceiling and wait for sleep that never came. 3 weeks of that, ever since moving into my new apartment. Second floor of an old converted duplex on the outskirts of Evansville, Indiana. Quiet street, older neighborhood, big oak trees. On paper, exactly the kind of place that should have helped me sleep. But it didn't. My doctor put me on a low-dose sleep aid. It helped, but barely. I drift off around 2 or 3, and wake up groggy and hollow a few hours later. That kind of deprivation does something to your head. Everything starts to feel slightly off, like the world is a movie set and you're the only one who notices the seams. I started second-guessing things I'd never normally think twice about, whether I'd locked the door, whether I'd actually turned the stove off or just imagined it. So when I started hearing the sounds, I didn't trust myself at first. It began about 2 weeks in, a soft, almost rhythmic noise from somewhere outside. My bedroom window faced the backyard, overgrown grass, a rusted chain-link fence, an alley beyond it. The first night I heard it, I told myself it was a branch on the siding. The second night, an animal in the bushes. By the fourth night, I couldn't explain it away, because I'd finally placed what it actually sounded like. Breathing, slow and deliberate, just below my window. I sat up and stayed completely still. The medication makes you foggy, and I kept reasoning with myself. You're half asleep, you're imagining it. But the sound didn't stop. It steadied, and there was something about the rhythm that turned my stomach. It wasn't the quick, shuffling breath of an animal. It was patient, controlled, human. I didn't go to the window that night. I told myself the motion sensor light would have triggered. I lay back down until the sound stopped around 4, then fell asleep because my body simply gave out. I probably should have called someone. I know that now. Instead, I bought a flashlight and kept it on my nightstand, which looking back is almost funny. Like some part of me had already accepted I was going to need it. The next time I heard the breathing, I got up. I moved to the window the way you move when instinct is screaming to be small, to be quiet, to not let whatever is outside know you're there. I pressed against the wall and carefully peeled back the edge of the curtain. For a second, just the pale flat light of the backyard and the dark line of the fence. And then I looked down. There was a man standing directly below my window, completely still, head tilted back at an angle that looked wrong, like his neck had too much give in it. No coat despite the cold, his lips were moving, but what made my breath stop, what made my hand go slack on the curtain, was what he was holding against his chest, cradling it gently, the way you'd hold something precious, a picture frame. And even in that dim light, I recognized it immediately. The small wooden frame, the photo of my mom and me, the one that had been sitting on my nightstand. I spun around. My eyes went straight to the nightstand. The flashlight was there. My phone was there. where the frame had been every single night for 3 weeks. There was nothing, just a pale rectangle of undisturbed dust outlining exactly where it used to sit. My brain kept cycling through the same desperate loop. Maybe I moved it. Maybe I packed it already. The way your mind throws itself against a wall rather than accept what it already knows. But I hadn't packed anything, and the dust didn't lie. He had been in my apartment. He had stood in my bedroom, close enough to reach across and lift that frame off the nightstand while I slept, and I had never once woken up. All those nights I'd lain there listening to the breathing outside, telling myself the window was between us, telling myself I was safe. He had already been inside. The window was never the barrier I thought it was. I slid down the wall to the floor and didn't make a sound. Some instinct told me that being heard was the wrong thing to do. I sat in the dark with my knees to my chest and my hand clamped over my mouth. I called 911. I was on the phone with the dispatcher for 11 minutes. By the time the patrol car arrived, the backyard was empty. The officer walked around the perimeter and found no signs of trespassing. He was kind about it, but I could hear the skepticism. A young woman, sleep problems, new apartment. I knew exactly how it sounded. He left just after 3:30. At 4:15, I heard the breathing again. I didn't go to the window. I sat on the floor with my back against the bed until morning light came through the curtains, and my neck ached so badly I could barely move. I broke my lease 3 weeks later, ate the penalty, didn't care. The night before I moved, I ran into my downstairs neighbor for the first time, an older woman. She asked where I was going so soon, and I gave her some vague answer about a change of scenery. She nodded, then said something I've turned over in my head almost every day since. The previous tenant moved out the same way, in a hurry, and the one before that, and the one before that. She said it plainly, the way you'd mentioned the weather, and went back inside. I don't know what was standing in that backyard. I don't know what it wanted, but I think about the frame, about how carefully he must have moved through my room, how quietly, how he could have done anything, and chose instead to take that one small thing back out into the dark with him, like a souvenir, like proof, like a message meant for exactly the moment I looked down and see him holding it. I never got it back. I didn't want it. I almost didn't go to Portland. My college roommate, Dana, had been asking me to visit for 2 years, and I kept putting it off the way you do with people you genuinely love but never quite make time for. She was finishing her residency at OHSU and living in a rented Victorian in the Albina neighborhood, the kind of house with high ceilings and original wood floors that creaked in a specific rhythm you eventually learn to navigate. I drove up from Eugene on a Thursday in late October, packed for 4 days, with no particular plan beyond catching up and finally seeing the city she kept insisting I was missing out on. The drive was easy. We ordered Thai food and talked until midnight, and I slept on a pullout in her study on the ground floor facing the street. The neighborhood was quiet in a way that felt earned rather than empty. Old maples lining the sidewalk, distant traffic, the occasional siren. I slept fine. Friday, we ate lunch somewhere Dana knew the owner. It was a good day, the kind that reminds you why you bother maintaining friendships across distance. Saturday is when it started. We were in the Pearl District around 3 in the afternoon, heading toward a gallery Dana wanted to show me. The street was busy with weekend foot traffic, strollers, couples, people carrying bags from the farmer's market that had just wrapped up a few blocks north. That's when I noticed him across the street. A man in a dark suit, not a trendy suit, not a casual blazer over jeans. A formal suit, black, with a white dress shirt buttoned to the collar and no tie. He was walking in the same direction as the foot traffic, but at a pace so unhurried it almost looked like he was moving backward relative to everyone else. He had a slight build, gray at his temples, and he walked with his hands loose at his sides, not swinging the way people naturally do, just hanging there, still. I watched him for a few seconds and looked away. Dana was talking about the artist whose work we were going to see. I nodded along. We stayed in the gallery about 40 minutes. When we came out, I scanned the street out of habit, and I didn't see him. I told myself I'd already forgotten what he looked like anyway. We ended up across the river in the late afternoon, walking through a stretch of southeast Portland lined with coffee shops and vintage stores. Dana had stopped to read a menu posted outside a wine bar. I glanced down the block and felt something pull at me the way a half-remembered word does. That reaching, unresolved sensation. He was there. Same suit, same posture, same deliberate and slightly wrong pace. He was maybe 60 yards away, moving in our direction without appearing to be going anywhere. I studied him the way you study something when you're deciding whether you're being ridiculous or not. The gray at the temples, hands hanging still at his sides. I said something to Dana about it, trying to frame it casually, and she looked down the block. But by then he turned into a side street. She took my word for it that it was strange and suggested a coincidence, another man in a suit. I agreed out loud. We had plans that night with two of Dana's colleagues, dinner in a loud ramen place in Kearns. I was in good company, and by the second hour I had genuinely stopped thinking about him. The table was warm and the conversation was easy. And Portland at night has a particular amber quality to its streetlights, the kind that makes everything feel slightly cinematic and safe. We left the restaurant around 10. The four of us walked out together and stood on the sidewalk doing the extended goodbye that happens after good dinners. Dana's colleague was mid-sentence about a hiking trail when I stopped listening. He was across the street, stationary this time, which was somehow worse than the walking. Standing on the opposite sidewalk near a closed storefront, facing our direction. Not staring exactly, more like oriented. The suit looked the same, so did the stillness of his hands. The other three hadn't noticed him. I watched him for what felt like a long time, but was probably 15 seconds. And then Dana touched my arm because we were walking and I had stopped. I looked back once as we turned the corner. He was still there. Same position. I didn't bring it up again that night. Dana lives alone, and the Victorian, for all its charm, has the anatomy of a house designed to produce sounds. The study where I was sleeping had one window that looked directly onto the front porch and the street beyond. I left the curtain partly open because the room felt small with it shut. I woke at 2 a.m. The way you sometimes wake with the immediate, unearned certainty that something is different. Not a sound, or nothing I could identify as one. I lay there for a moment and then turned toward the window. He was on the porch. Not at the window, not looking in. He was standing at the far end of the porch near the railing with his back to me, facing the street. His posture was the same as it always was. Hands at his sides. That quality of complete stillness. Except he was there, on a private porch, at 2 a.m. I did not move. I'm not sure how long I laid there before he turned around and walked down the porch steps with that same measured pace and moved down the sidewalk without looking back. He disappeared under the maples at the edge of the streetlight's reach and was gone. I didn't sleep again that night. I told Dana in the morning over coffee. I told her all of it, including the porch. And I watched her face go through the sequence of responses you go through when someone you trust is telling you something you don't have a framework for. She's a physician. She defaults to explanation. She sat with it quietly for a while before she said carefully that she believed me. What stays with me isn't the fear exactly. It's the specificity, the consistency of him. The suit never changed, the pace never changed, the hands never changed. It was though he had been constructed with a single purpose, and was executing it without variation or fatigue. I drove back to Eugene on Sunday afternoon. The drive is about 2 hours, and somewhere past Salem, I notice I have been holding my jaw tight for the last 40 minutes. Dana texted me 3 weeks later. She didn't lead with anything. Just sent a photo. It was her front porch, taken from inside the study window. My angle, the exact spot where I'd been sleeping. The timestamp in the corner read 2:17 a.m. She'd set up a motion-activated camera after I left, she explained in the message below. She said it had gone off twice before without catching anything she could see. This was the third time. He was standing at the far end of the porch. Same suit, same hands at his sides. But he wasn't facing the street this time. He was facing the window. She called the police that night, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. After that, nothing. No more motion alerts. No more figures at the edge of the porch light. She moved out 2 weeks later. She's staying with a colleague now, and no more figures at the edge of the porch light. I debated for a long time whether to write this at all. Partly because I'm still processing what happened, and partly because I know how this kind of story sounds from the outside. I know people will say there are perfectly reasonable explanations, and maybe there are. But there's a part of me that hasn't slept right in 3 weeks, so I'm going to write it down anyway. I moved into my new apartment in early April. Ground floor of a 4-story building, older construction. The kind of place with thick plaster walls and radiators that tick and groan when the heat kicks on. It's not a bad place, affordable, close to my job, and quiet. Or at least, it was supposed to be. The layout matters here. My bedroom is at the back of the unit. Above it is apartment 2B. Between my ceiling and their floor, there's maybe 8 inches of old concrete and insulation. Sound travels through it with an almost unsettling clarity. Not voices, just footsteps, and the occasional creak of furniture. Stuff you'd expect. For the first 2 months, I barely registered any of it. My upstairs neighbor kept unusual hours, but I worked nights twice a week, so I wasn't in a position to judge. I'd hear them moving around at 2, sometimes 3 in the morning. Slow, steady pacing, like someone who couldn't sleep walking laps in their apartment. I figured insomnia. I figured stress. I figured it had nothing to do with me. The first time I saw my neighbor was by accident. I was taking out recycling on a Sunday morning when I nearly ran into a man coming out of the stairwell door. Mid-50s, lean in an unhealthy way, deep-set eyes, and the kind of pallor that made him look like he hadn't been outside in months. He looked at me for just a second too long before nodding and walking past. I introduced myself. He told me his name was Carl. He didn't shake my hand. After that, I started paying more attention to the footsteps. They had a pattern. He'd start pacing around midnight, sometimes earlier. But what I hadn't noticed before was that the pacing always ended in the same spot, the far corner of his bedroom, directly above mine, above my bed specifically, and it always stopped there. Not gradually, not with the natural settling of someone climbing into bed. It just stopped, like he walked to that spot and stood still. I tried to let it go. The rational part of my brain told me I was being ridiculous. The guy couldn't sleep. He liked to stand by his window. Who cares? Then, about 3 weeks ago, I woke up at 2:17 a.m. to a sound I couldn't identify, low and rhythmic. I lay there listening for a full minute before I understood what it was. Breathing. Slow, deliberate breathing, coming through the vent in the baseboard next to my bed. The vents in that building run between floors, and I never thought about that before. I sat up and didn't move. I told myself it was the pipes, told myself old buildings make sounds. I got up and pressed my ear to the vent, half expecting to hear distant air circulation. Instead, I heard it stop, just like the footsteps always stopped, as though whatever was on the other end had heard me move. I didn't sleep again that night. The next day, I went upstairs to say something. Casual, non-confrontational, just checking in about the noise. I knocked on 2B. There was shuffling on the other side. I could see the shadow shift beneath the gap at the bottom, feet standing just on the other side, unmoving. He never opened the door. I stood there for almost 2 minutes before I walked back downstairs. That was when I stopped being able to explain it away. I started sleeping with the light on. I moved my bed away from the vent and ran a noise machine on my phone. For about 4 days it worked. Then, 8 days ago, I came home late from a shift and found something on the mat outside my door. A photograph, one of those older printed ones, a little faded, face down, like it had been slid under the door but hadn't made it all the way through. I picked it up and flipped it over. It was a picture of my apartment. Not the building, my apartment, taken through my bedroom window from outside at night. You could see the outline of my bed, the edge of the lamp on my nightstand. Whoever took it was standing in the narrow alley along the back of the building, directly below 2B. I went inside, locked every deadbolt, and sat on the couch with every light on until exhaustion finally pulled me under sometime past 3 a.m. I woke up to the sound of the stairwell door closing at the end of the hall, that heavy metallic clunk it makes when it shuts all the way. I opened my eyes and lay completely still, listening, and then I heard it. Not from above, not from the vent, but from the hallway just outside my front door. The soft, deliberate sound of weight shifting on old floorboards. One slow step, then a pause, then another. The footsteps stopped directly outside my door. Then came the sound I'll never be able to unhear. My door handle being tested. Just once, slow and controlled, like someone confirming something they already suspected. It didn't rattle. It didn't jerk. It turned with a kind of practiced patience that was so much worse than if someone had tried to kick it in. I couldn't move. I watched the handle and saw it, barely. The thin sliver of shadow shift in the gap between the door and frame, as whoever was on the other side leaned close. The deadbolt held. Then, something slid under the door and skittered across the hard wood, coming to rest against the leg of my coffee table. A box cutter, clean, cheap, blade fully extended. No note, no knock, no words, just that, left there like a message I was meant to understand. I didn't sleep. I didn't call anyone. I sat in the silence until the sky went gray, then got up, pulled 2 duffel bags from my closet, and started filling them. I didn't pack everything. Clothes, laptop, documents, whatever fit into 2 trips to my car. I broke my lease, 2 months' rent, and I would pay it 100 times over. I'm staying with my girlfriend now. Different part of the city, different building, different everything. I still check the gap under the door before I go to sleep. I still lie awake listening for footsteps in the wrong place. I'm a woman in my late 20s. I moved into my apartment about 2 years ago. 2nd floor unit, corner placement, older building. The kind of place that has character, which is a polite way of saying the walls are thin and the radiator sounds like a dying animal when the temperature drops. But the rent was reasonable, the neighborhood was quiet, and I had a doorman on the ground floor. It felt safe. That mattered to me after living alone for the first time. I work from home doing freelance accounting, numbers, spreadsheets, tax documents, about as far from anything strange or exciting as you could possibly get. My life has a rhythm to it, and I like that rhythm. Same coffee every morning, same walk every afternoon, same desk, same chair, same everything. I know my apartment the way you know your own hands. That's what made it so disturbing when things started feeling slightly, almost imperceptibly, wrong. It began small, weeks before anything serious happened. I come back from my afternoon walk and get this feeling, not a thought exactly, more like a physical sensation, that the air inside my apartment was different, displaced somehow, like the feeling you get stepping into a room right after someone has left it. I dismissed it every single time. I told myself the building was old, the ventilation was poor. The unit above me had a new tenant who worked odd hours. Explanations were easy. I was good at them. Then I started noticing the vent. It's a large return air vent set into the wall at the far end of my hallway, maybe 2 feet wide and 1.5 feet tall. I'd never paid attention to it before, but one evening, I walked past it and noticed the grate was sitting at an angle. Not removed, just slightly cocked, like something had pushed against it from inside. I figured the building's ancient HVAC had finally given up some piece of itself. I pushed the grate flush with the wall, heard it click into place, and forgot about it. 3 days later, it was angled again. I told myself it was air pressure. I told myself it was the building settling. I told myself a lot of things over the weeks that followed. Because the alternative, the thing my brain kept trying to hand me that I kept refusing to take, was not something I was willing to consider. Then one night, everything stopped being subtle. I was at my desk around midnight, finishing a client report. No music, no TV. My apartment was completely silent except for the low hiss of the radiator. I had that productive tunnel vision you sometimes get late at night where hours feel like minutes. And then, from somewhere inside the wall, I heard movement. Not the building settling, not pipes. Movement. Something shifting its weight deliberately, carefully, in the narrow space behind the ductwork. I sat completely still, told myself it was an animal, a rat maybe, something that had gotten into the ventilation. I stared at my screen and waited for the sound to stop. It didn't stop. It got closer. By the time I realized the sound had traveled the entire length of my hallway wall and stopped directly behind the vent grate, I was already standing. I don't remember deciding to stand. My body just did it. I stood with my back against the deck, staring down the dark hallway at the vent, and I watched the grate push slowly, silently outward. I want to explain to you what it feels like to watch something like that happen. To watch a thing that you've been explaining away for weeks reveal itself as exactly what you feared. Your brain doesn't process it clearly. There's no single moment of horror. It comes in waves. First confusion, then recognition, then a kind of cold total terror that empties you out completely. The grate was pushed all the way open now, hanging by one corner, and the opening behind it was dark in a way that felt dense. I couldn't see anything. I stood there for what felt like a full minute, straining my eyes against the black rectangle in my wall, telling myself there was nothing there, telling myself I had imagined the movement, telling myself to walk over and look. And then, from somewhere inside that darkness, I heard a single, quiet sound, the soft drag of fabric against metal, like someone slowly, carefully shifting position. I ran. I didn't grab anything. I didn't think. I just sprinted for my front door. I had the deadbolt half turned when I heard it, the sound of the grate hitting the hallway floor behind me, and then footsteps, heavy and fast, crossing the distance of my apartment with a speed that made my hands go numb on the lock. I got the door open. I got into the hallway. I was screaming, though I can't remember starting. I pounded on the neighbor's door across the hall with both fists, and heard her shout something startled from inside. Heard her moving toward the door. I kept screaming because behind me, I could hear my own front door swinging open, and I could hear the footsteps coming into the hall, and she still hadn't opened her door yet. I pressed my back flat against the wall next to her door and turned around. He was standing in the doorway of my apartment, tall, completely calm, wearing dark clothes, and he was looking at me with an expression I've thought about every single day since it happened. Not rage, not panic, just this flat, patient look, like someone waiting for a bus, like he had all the time in the world, like I wasn't going anywhere. And then my neighbor's door finally opened, and the light from her unit spilled into the hallway. He took one long look at the brightness and stepped back into the dark of my apartment, and then was gone. The police found my vent had been modified from inside the shaft. They wouldn't tell me much else. They wouldn't tell me how long the modifications looked like they'd been there. What I keep coming back to is everything I still don't know, and I've stopped trying to find out. What I do know is that I lived in that apartment for 2 years. 2 years of late nights, private moments, every unguarded version of myself I never thought anyone was watching. And the question that lives in me now is simple. how many of those moments weren't private at all. I don't know when it started. I don't know what he was waiting for. I don't know if that night was the first time he'd come out, or just the first time I'd been awake to see it. Some questions don't get answered. Some doors just stay open. I used to do night fishing alone out at Kern Reservoir. I haven't gone back since last March, and I don't think I ever will. For context, Kern is a man-made reservoir about 40 minutes outside of town, surrounded by nothing but scrub brush, dry grass, and a few gravel access roads that the county barely maintains. In the summer, it gets crowded with families and jet skiers, but in early spring, it hasn't woken up yet. The seasonal crowd is still weeks away and the place is nearly empty. I liked it that way. I'd driven out there a dozen times over the years to fish the North Shore after dark, where the bass run deep and the only sounds are frogs and wind. I knew the place well. I felt comfortable there. That night, I got there around 9. I parked at the end of the North Access Road and walked my gear about 300 yards down to the bank. There's a flat shelf of packed dirt that juts out slightly over the water. Not a dock, just geography, and I'd fished from it plenty of times before. I set up my folding chair, rigged 2 rods, cracked a thermos of coffee, and settled in. The sky was clear and there was a half moon, which gave enough light to see the water and the tree line at my back. I wasn't using a lantern. I never do. Light spooks the fish and I learned to work by feel and starlight. I like the dark. For the first hour or so, everything was fine. I got 2 decent bites, landed 1, released it. The air was cold, but I was dressed for it. I wasn't thinking about anything in particular. That's the whole reason I go, to not think. Then I noticed the light. It was moving slowly along the far tree line, maybe 150 yards to my left, heading in my direction. A flashlight, the way it bobbed with each step. I watched it for a moment, assuming it was another angler, and then turned back to my line, but the light kept coming. It didn't stop at any point along the bank. It just kept moving toward where I was sitting. When it was maybe 60 yards out, it went off. I kept my eyes on the spot where it had been. The moon gave just enough light to see shapes, but not faces. I couldn't make out anything moving. After a minute or 2, I told myself the person had found their spot and sat down, or maybe headed back to the trees. I let it go and focused on my rod. Half an hour passed. I was reaching for my thermos when I realized there was something standing at the edge of the tree line about 40 yards behind me and to my right. Not moving, just standing there. I don't know how to explain how I knew. I hadn't heard anything. But I looked up and turned, and there it was. A shape, dark and still, roughly the height and proportion of a person. I stared at it for what felt like a long time. It didn't move. In the bad light, it could have been a post or a dead tree stump. I told myself that. But there were no stumps in that spot. I'd walked past it plenty of times. I turned slowly back toward the water, keeping my body relaxed. My pulse was going. A few minutes later, I turned around again. The shape was still there, same position, hadn't moved an inch. I called out, said hello, said I didn't mean to bother anyone. My voice felt strange in the open air, too loud, too obvious. No response. The shape didn't react at all. I packed up my closer rod slowly, kept my movements easy, like I was just organizing. In reality, I was getting ready to move. My truck was 300 yards away, and I had to walk back along the bank and then up the access road. I didn't love the idea of walking past the tree line in the dark with whatever was standing there watching. When I finally stood, the shape moved. It took 1 step toward me, just 1, and stopped. I picked up my gear bag and started walking, keeping my pace measured. I didn't run. Running felt like the wrong decision in a way I can't fully articulate. I just walked, staying close to the water's edge, moving in the direction of the access road. For the first 100 yards, I didn't look back. When I did, I couldn't see the shape anymore. The tree line was just dark and still. I kept walking. I was about halfway up the access road, my truck visible at the top, when I heard footsteps in the gravel behind me. Not hurrying, matching my pace almost exactly. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I started walking again. So did they. I want to be clear. I don't scare easily. I spent hundreds of nights outdoors alone. I hunt. I've had bears in camps. I know the difference between your brain manufacturing threats and something actually being wrong. This was wrong. Something in my body knew it before my mind caught up. I didn't turn around this time. I just walked. Then I walked faster. And by the last 100 yards, I was moving at nearly a jog. I could hear the footsteps keeping up, gravel grinding, irregular, unhurried. I got to my truck, got in, and locked the doors. Immediately started it. In the headlights, I could see the road stretching back down to the reservoir. I put it in reverse and turned around. As I did, the light swept across the gravel. There was a man standing about 30 feet behind where I'd been parked. He was wearing dark clothing and was just standing there, looking at the truck. He didn't raise a hand or call out. He didn't move toward me or away from me. He just stood there in the red wash of my brake lights and watched me. I drove away. I didn't stop until I was back on the highway. I've told the story to a few people, and most of them asked some version of the same question. Maybe it was just a guy out for a walk. Maybe he was harmless. And the honest answer is I don't know. I didn't wait around long enough to find out. What I do know is that something about the whole thing didn't feel random or incidental. The light going off when it got close, the shape in the trees that waited until I stood to take one step toward me, the footsteps that matched mine exactly. None of it felt like coincidence. It felt deliberate, practiced even. I've thought about it a lot since then. And the thing that stays with me isn't the fear I felt in the moment. It's the question of how long he'd been there before I noticed. The reservoir, the dark, the 300 yards of empty gravel road between me and my truck. He would have had plenty of time to figure out the math on that. Whatever he was thinking, whatever he was waiting for, I'm glad I left when I did. I don't fish that reservoir anymore. And I tell people it's because the bass run dried up. I moved into the duplex on Ardmore Street in March, right after my divorce was finalized. It wasn't the kind of place I'd imagined living in my 40s, but it was cheap, it was mine, and nobody else's name was on the lease. The other unit had been vacant since the fall, according to my landlord, Gary. He said it like it was a minor inconvenience, not a selling point. But I took it as a selling point. I liked the idea of no neighbors, no shared walls full of other people's noise, just me. My routines those first few months was the kind that forms when you're too hollowed out to make real decisions. Wake up, coffee, work from the kitchen table, microwave something for dinner, fall asleep on the couch watching TV until about 1 or 2 in the morning, then drag myself to bed. I wasn't sleeping well. I told myself it was the divorce, the adjustment, the unfamiliar sounds of a new place. Old buildings have their own vocabulary, creaks and pops, and the particular whistle of a wind through a window that doesn't quite seal. I learned this one's language fast, or so I thought. The first thing I noticed was light. The duplex unit shared a small breezeway between the front doors, and there was a narrow window in the hallway of my unit that looked out into that breezeway. The other unit had a window in its own hallway, same position, mirror image of mine. One evening in early April, I was walking to the bathroom around midnight, and I saw a faint light coming from that window. The other unit's hallway light was on. Gary must have come by, I figured. Maybe a showing. I made a note to ask him and went to bed. I forgot to ask him. Then the smell started. Cigarette smoke, very faint, drifting through the bathroom wall that I shared with the other unit. I told myself it was coming in from outside. The weather was warming and people had their windows open. It wasn't a satisfying explanation, but it was the one I had. I finally called Gary in late April and told him I thought someone might be getting into the vacant unit. To his credit, he actually came out that time. He walked through the other side, changed the lock on its front door, and told me everything looked fine inside. No signs of anyone. He seemed unbothered. I felt better for about a week. That was, I later realized, the worst thing that could have happened. Whatever peace I felt evaporated quickly. The smoke smell didn't stop. If anything, it shifted. Less through the bathroom wall now, more diffuse, like it was coming from somewhere closer. Small things started disappearing from my kitchen. A can of soup, some crackers, half a jar of peanut butter I could have sworn was nearly full. I was tired and distracted, and I had the kind of mental load that makes you doubt your own memory of a pantry. So I let it go. Here's where I want to explain something about the psychology of that period. I was not a person who felt entitled to take up space or make demands. That was something my ex-wife had said to me, not unkindly, near the end. That I had a bad habit of minimizing my own discomfort until it became someone else's emergency. So when strange things happened, my instinct was to find the least alarming explanation and commit to it. The smell was outside air. The missing food was my own forgetfulness. I was a man in a new place, still learning the rhythms of it. My daughter came to stay for the first time in December. She's 9, and she'd been asking to see the new place for months. I've been putting it off without fully understanding why. When she finally arrived with her own overnight bag and her stuffed animals, she claimed the spare room immediately, arranged everything on the bed the way she liked it, and declared it cozy. When I tucked her in that night, I said her name softly, Ellie, the way you do when you want a moment to last a little longer. I stood in the doorway watching her and felt something loosen in my chest. She was already half asleep. I pulled the doorway half closed and sat in the kitchen with a glass of wine and felt. For the first time since March, I felt something close to okay. Around 11, I got up to use the bathroom and glanced out the hallway window by reflex. The other unit was completely dark. No light, no movement. Whatever had been going on over there, Gary's new lock seemed to have handled it. I went to bed feeling genuinely settled for the first time in months. In the morning, my daughter and I made pancakes and I watched her eat. I felt the particular lightness that comes when a problem you've been carrying seems to have resolved itself. I dropped her off that Sunday afternoon and came home to a quiet apartment and thought finally that things were turning over. That feeling lasted about a week. The smoke smell came back, but different this time. Not through the bathroom wall anymore. It was in the hallway, faint, and gone quickly enough that I second-guessed it each time. Then the food, a can of soup, some crackers, half a jar of peanut butter I could have sworn was nearly full. I was tired and told myself I was losing track of my own pantry. I kept that up until the Tuesday night I fell asleep on the couch and woke up at 2:40 in the morning to a sound from the spare room. My daughter wasn't there. She was back at her mother's, but the room wasn't empty, and some part of my sleeping brain understood that before the rest of me caught up. I laid completely still. The TV was on mute, throwing blue light across the ceiling. The sound came again, the low complaint of the spare room's closet door. I knew that sound well. The door sometimes drifted open on its own, but not like that. This wasn't the slow and even creak of it slipping loose. This was the sound of it being pulled. I didn't move for what felt like 10 minutes. Then the spare room door opened, and I heard footsteps moving through the dark toward the kitchen. Not running, not even hurrying. and the back door opened and closed with the quiet confidence of someone who used it before. I turned on every light in the house. I sat in the kitchen until sunrise. When I finally went into the spare room, the closet door was hanging open. On the floor, behind the box of my daughter's art supplies, the one she left behind to keep at Dad's place, was a duffel bag, men's clothes, a half-eaten sleeve of crackers, a phone charging cable, and a ring of keys I'd never seen before. One of them had the distinctive shape of a quickset house key, the same brand as every lock in the duplex. Then I looked at the spare room window. It was unlocked. The latch had always been stiff, and I rarely touched it, but now it moved freely, like it had been opened and closed many times. The window faced directly onto the breezeway. Gary had changed the lock on the other unit's front door and window, but neither he nor I had thought about my window. Someone had. When that front door and window stopped working, they found their way into my unit instead, and the most accessible window in the building happened to look directly into my daughter's room. She slept beneath it in December, with her stuffed animals arranged just the way she liked them, while that window moved freely in its frame. Did he come in while she was there? Did he step over her in the dark, or crouch in that closet listening to her breathe? I don't know. I'll probably never know, but the thought of it hasn't left me since. I called the police at 6:15 in the morning. I know I should have called sooner, weeks sooner, maybe. But as I said, my mind had a way of shrinking things down to a manageable size, of filing the uncomfortable under probably nothing and moving on. They responded, took the bag, took a report, and they made a note about the key. I watched them work and said very little. By the time they arrived, I had already been sitting at the kitchen table for 2 hours tracing backwards, through every night since March, every can of soup I couldn't account for. Every night that back door had clicked shut behind someone who knew exactly where I kept my routines. Gary had locked him out of one place, and so he'd found another. He'd been there, in this unit, longer than I wanted to calculate. Long enough that my daughter had slept 10 feet away from his hiding place and called the room cozy. Later that evening, after the police had gone and I was putting the spare room back together, I found something they had missed. Taped to the inside wall of the closet, up near the top where the shadow was deepest, was a small square of folded paper. I unfolded it slowly, the way you do when part of you already knows you don't want to see what's inside. My daughter's name was written on it. Just her name, nothing else. He'd been in that room in December. He had to have been. He heard me say her name through that window, or from inside that closet, on the very first night she was ever there. And he wrote it down, for whatever reason, I don't know. I haven't taken her back to that apartment. I don't think I will. I'm currently looking for a new place.